Hello, sixth graders. It's Mr. Carroll here. So today we're going to be talking about the first empires of India. And when we talk about the word empire, we mean, remember, we've talked about it before, and when we talked about Mesopotamia and Egypt and with Alexander the Great, it's when one group kind of expands out and controls under them many different types of cultural groups and kingdoms, all over the place. And so it's just kind of controlling all of those areas. And it doesn't have to be ruled by a king or an emperor, but it usually is. That's usually who rules empires, because you need to have strong leadership in government to kind of control and organize the army you need to conquer all of these different people. All right. And so we're going to talk about two of the empires in India. So Persia and Alexander the Great had taken over parts of Western India, and we can see on this map that shows in green the extent of Alexander's conquest. We can see where he kind of butted right up to where the Indus River Valley was. That's where that demarcation in the green is, off on the eastern side of it. The red is showing where he kind of like was bringing his army around, but remember, he got pushed back from India and his soldiers revolted and were like not having it, so they headed home. But because of this, it left kind of a weakened India as well. And not to say there was any like unified group at this point, anyways, because the Vedic kingdoms were all small and separate, and there was lots of infighting. All right, and so there's no one unified person who can kind of defend themselves. Honestly, if Alexander's army hadn't revolted, he probably could have conquered more of India, because they were so kind of ununified, similar to how the Greeks were ununified, and there was their city-states, and they like everyone had their own little, like Sparta had their own lands, and Athens had their own lands. So there was a lot of infighting, no unification. Until we get to this military officer named Chandragupta Maurya, and he ended up kind of building a strong army, and he took the lessons from Alexander, and he started to expand out and unify everyone. He is known as the first ruler of the Mauryan dynasty, or the Mauryan Empire. All right, and that's why it's named that, because it's his last name. It's pretty common to name an empire after that. And he started this all in 321 BCE. That's 3 or 4 years right after Alexander kind of turned around. He ended up setting up his capital in Pataliputra, which is on the Ganges River, and you can see it on this map. It's that gold star right in there underneath the word Magda. And he set it up there because it's on the Ganges, which is an important river, and it allows for good communication. And he ended up able to set up a very kind of strong administration in his empire here. Strong administration, and it had an efficient post office kind of system where you're allowed to send labels and everything. Successful communication on rivers and roads, and that always kind of unifies everyone under a single empire, and also kind of helps everyone to bring peaceful means of ideas of this. Empires always do better if they can kind of have a large period of more peace than war. It's usually when you have so much fight in that you end up falling apart. Although I will note that Chandragupta was paranoid. He was known to never have slept in the same bed for 2 nights in a row, and he had slaves try his food before he would eat it himself, because he was so concerned about being attacked or killed. He ended up dying in 298 BCE, and passing on the empire to his son, and then passing it on to Ashoka, who is his grandson. And Ashoka rules from 273 to 232 BCE. This is around the same time that the Diadochi in Greece are ruling all of the parts of Alexander's kingdom. This is also the same time that Rome is starting to come to power in this area, and that there's unification happening in China at the same time. He's kind of an interesting ruler or king because he started off with conquering. He expanded the empire to its greatest extent, all the way down south into the Deccan Plateau and off to the Hindu Kush, and taken actually some of the land that Alexander had conquered. But then after one particularly gory battle, he was so horrified by what he saw that he changed his ways and started to follow Buddhist teachings and became a man of peace. And this had a great boon for Buddhism because he started to spread Buddhism all throughout his kingdom. He set up pillars like the one you see here, which has Buddhist teachings on it. Like this idea here from the summary of the law of piety. All right, father and mother must be hearkened. Similarly, respect for living creatures must be firmly established. Truth must be spoken. These are the virtues of the law of piety or devotion, which must be practiced. So statements like that would be carved onto pillars like you see here off to the left-hand side of the screen. He also built these buildings called stupas, which look kind of like a mound. In Greece or in Italy, I've seen things look like this. They're known as burial mounds, but they are really just they're shrines. They contain religious objects that are important to Buddhism, and it's a place of worship. All right. And so this allowed Buddhism to spread throughout India at this time. He is also known for his religious toleration, and so he kind of allowed Hinduism to continue to be practiced as if the subject or his people wanted to. All right, and so all this peace brought about more road construction, which brought about more trade, which brings more money. The Indians at this point are trading as far away as China and Japan in the east, all the way over to the Mediterranean Sea in the west. And that's always bringing about more money, right? Peace is always a better alternative than war. Not many people win over in war, but when you have peace, there's trade and there's enough food for everyone, and so it's always kind of successful. Unfortunately, after Ashoka died, in 232, there was a series of bad rulers, people who were paranoid or who wanted to have conquering glory, and so they tried to get more money by raising taxes. They stole land from farmers, which led to revolts, and that's going to be a common theme we see when we study China, when we study Eastern Asia, when we study medieval Europe. When you tax and take land from the farmers, people get mad. And all of this kind of weakened the kingdom up until 183 BCE, when it kind of all fell apart. And so the kingdom that Chandragupta had brought together and Ashoka had brought to its golden age, kind of all fell apart at this point in 183, and it was almost a 500-year period of wars and fighting that was occurring between different kingdoms. It was kind of back to what it had been before with the Vedic period. So then we move into a new empire that starts around 320 CE. All right. And so it started in the Ganges River Valley, and that's where the dark blue is. And you can see the diamond. You can see the capital there is the same as the Mauryan Empire. It is Pataliputra. They use the same capital, and you'll notice that the first king of the Gupta Empire is Chandragupta I. It's a common thing for rulers to hearken back to previous successful rulers. So this Gupta the first saw Chandragupta Maurya to be successful and kind of wanted to emulate him. So he put the capital in the same place. He has the same name as him. And this is kind of a similar thing. Napoleon harkens to Julius Caesar and Alexander the Great. The Emperor Augustus harkened back to Alexander the Great. Like a lot of rulers will harken back to the successful ones they see. And so he kind of expands it into this dark blue, and he rules for 10 to 15 years. We're actually not sure. He might have ruled longer. So from 320 to 335 CE. And he set up as his successor his son Chandragupta, which is always good when you can have an easy line of succession from one person to the other, because then you don't have to worry about infighting or people fighting with each other. And so some mudra rules for from when his father died in either 335 or 350, we're not actually sure, to 375 CE, and he expands it into the light blue, and he brings about another golden age, another age of peace. Golden age is just kind of a shorthand for when people were really successful and there's a lot of peace going on and everyone is really happy and well fed, and there's ideas are growing and changing. And he brings about because he is increasing the trade with other people, and he's allowing for science and all sorts of other things to advance. So the Guptas practice Hinduism, and they supported Hindu scholars and temples. So they're paying for Hindus, although Buddhism is still being practiced, as this carved Buddhist sculpture shows us right here. They're trading with China, the Mediterranean basin, which at this time is the Roman Empire, and Southeast Asia, so that's Vietnam, Cambodia, Thailand, Indonesia. And they're trading things like salt and cloth and iron for more gold and silver, which they're then able to put back into these Hinduism and Hindu temples and Hindu scholars, and also to math scholars. We have one math scholar here on the page, Aryabhata, who is credited with discovering algebra, the idea of infinity, the idea of zero, and the numbers 1 through 9 that we use today. They come to us from Arab traders who Arab traders at this time who were trading with India and brought it over to the medieval Europe, and they started using numbers 1 through 9. That's why we don't use Roman numerals anymore. It's also the time when we get this theory of heliocentrism, or the belief that the Earth revolves around the sun. There's been competing theories about this, but in Europe at this time, Ptolemy, who was a ancient Greek scholar, his idea that the Earth was the center of the world was the prevalent theory, and so it's actually Gupta scholars that have this new idea that it's the sun that's the center of it. They also see advances in surgery, where we see this Dr. Shashrata, who is able to actually perform a kind of early type of plastic surgery on noses and able to fix noses there. And they're set in broken bones. They're performing, they're sewing up wounds, and they're using things like scalpels and needles to do it. And obviously before this, there had been golden age, right? In the Vedic period, we had them writing those epic poems down, like the Bhagavad Gita, or the Song of the Lord, which is talking about the deity Krishna, or the Mahabharata, which is talking about a struggle for control of the Indian kingdoms, or even the Ramayana. And those are all poems that are being written about in the Vedic period, but we get this kind of blossoming when we also have this unified government and support and money for all of these things. So that's kind of a brief run through of the two major Indian kingdoms at this point in the world timeline. As always, if you have any questions, feel free to email me or go ahead and leave a comment below. I hope you're all staying safe, and I look forward to teaching you again real soon.